Imagine a toothache that never stops. Not the kind you sleep off, not the kind a pill fixes by morning. A deep, throbbing infection sitting right at the root of your tooth, getting worse every single day, with absolutely no way to stop it. There's no dentist, no painkillers, no antibiotics, nothing. Just you, the pain, and time. Today, if your tooth hurts, you book an appointment, sit in a comfortable chair, get numbed with an injection, and it's over in 20 minutes. You barely think about it afterward. But for most of human history, a bad tooth wasn't a minor inconvenience. It could genuinely kill you. And the way ancient humans dealt with that might be one of the most brutal and surprisingly clever parts of our past. So how bad did it actually get, and what did people do about it? The first thing to understand is that ancient diets weren't necessarily worse for teeth than ours. In some ways, they were better. Less sugar, less processed food. But they came with a different problem entirely: grit. Grinding grain between two stones left tiny particles of stone dust mixed into the flour. Every meal slowly sanded down tooth enamel. Over decades, that wear exposed the sensitive inner layers of the tooth. And once that happens, infection isn't far behind. An infection in a tooth doesn't stay in the tooth. Left untreated, it spreads into the jawbone, then potentially into the bloodstream.
Archaeologists studying ancient skeletons regularly find jawbones with abscess holes, small pockets where infection ate straight through bone. Before antibiotics existed, a serious dental abscess could be fatal, not eventually, directly. Sepsis from a tooth infection was a real, documented cause of death for thousands of years, and it stayed that way right up until the 20th century. So people needed some way to deal with it, and the evidence shows they tried almost everything. The oldest known dental intervention comes from a site in Italy, a 14,000-year-old tooth with clear drilling marks and traces of bitumen, a tar-like substance, packed into the hole. That's not accidental damage. That's someone identifying a decayed tooth, drilling out the rotten material, and sealing the cavity. 14,000 years ago, someone was doing something recognizably close to a modern filling, without metal tools, without anesthesia, using nothing but sharpened stone. And it gets more advanced from there. In Pakistan, at a site called Mehrgarh, archaeologists found teeth dating back roughly 9,000 years, with small, precise holes drilled directly into the enamel, using flint drill bits. Researchers actually recreated the process with a bow drill, the same tool used for making fire, and found it could bore through tooth enamel in under a minute. Under a minute, with someone holding your head still and no way to numb the pain. Because that's the part that's almost impossible to imagine. There was no anesthesia, not in any real sense.
Some cultures used natural painkillers, willow bark, which contains a compound chemically related to aspirin, or extracts from plants with mild numbing properties. But none of that comes close to actually blocking serious pain. Whoever sat still for that drilling had to endure it directly, fully conscious, trusting that someone else's steady hand was better than doing nothing at all. And sometimes doing nothing wasn't an option, because the alternative to treatment was extraction, and extraction without modern tools was its own kind of horror. Archaeologists have found evidence across multiple ancient cultures of teeth removed using nothing but cord, wedges, and brute force. In some cases, skeletal remains show healed jaw fractures right next to missing teeth, suggesting the extraction itself sometimes broke the jaw. People survived that, and then presumably went back to living their lives with a shattered jaw slowly knitting itself back together.
By the time you reach ancient Egypt, dental problems get taken seriously enough to show up directly in medical writing. The Edwin Smith Papyrus and the Ebers Papyrus, both roughly 3,500 years old, include descriptions of tooth pain, gum disease, and loose teeth, along with treatments. Some Egyptian remains have been found with teeth bound together using gold wire, likely to stabilize a loose tooth next to a healthy one, an early, functional version of a dental splint. That's not guesswork. That's someone understanding that a failing tooth could be physically supported by the one beside it. The ancient Egyptians also documented something called tooth worms, the belief that cavities were caused by literal worms burrowing into the tooth. It sounds absurd now, but the logic wasn't insane. Decayed tooth tissue looks dark and tunneled, almost exactly like something has bored through it. Without microscopes, without any concept of bacteria, tooth worms was actually a reasonable explanation for something that looked exactly like an invasion. And this idea didn't stay in Egypt. Versions of the toothworm belief show up independently in ancient Sumeria, in Chinese medical texts, in medieval Europe, and even in some indigenous American traditions, completely separate cultures arriving at strikingly similar explanations because the evidence in front of them looked the same everywhere. Some cultures took prevention more seriously than treatment.
In ancient Egypt and later in Rome, people used chew sticks, twigs from specific trees with natural antibacterial properties, frayed at one end into a crude brush. The miswak stick, made from the Salvadora persica tree, is still used today in parts of the Middle East and Africa, and modern chemical analysis shows it actually does contain natural antimicrobial compounds. That's not folk medicine that happened to work by coincidence. That's several thousand years of trial and error landing on something that holds up under a microscope. The Romans went even further, and this next part is genuinely hard to believe. Roman dental hygiene sometimes included tooth powders and even primitive mouthwashes. And one specific ingredient shows up repeatedly in historical writing: urine. Specifically aged urine, sometimes imported from Portugal because it was considered higher quality. The ammonia produced as urine ages acts as a genuinely effective cleaning agent, and it actually does whiten teeth and kill bacteria. It sounds insane, but it wasn't wrong. It was chemistry, discovered completely by accident, centuries before anyone understood what ammonia even was. By around 700 AD in China, someone had figured out amalgam fillings, a mixture of silver and other metals used to fill cavities, remarkably similar in concept to fillings still used today, just 14 centuries earlier and without any understanding of metallurgy in the modern sense. And across the ancient world, wealthier individuals sometimes went as far as full tooth replacement.
Skeletons from the ancient Etruscans, over 2,600 years old, have been found with gold bridgework holding replacement teeth in place, sometimes using teeth pulled from animals, sometimes from other humans, wired directly onto the remaining natural teeth. So across completely different civilizations that never had contact with each other, the same pattern shows up again and again: drilling, filling, splinting, extracting, replacing. Different tools, different materials, wildly different explanations for why it was happening, but the same fundamental drive: do something, anything, because doing nothing meant the infection kept spreading, the pain kept building, and eventually it could kill you. And that's really the part that's easy to miss. We think of ancient dentistry as primitive, and in some ways it obviously was, but the underlying problem-solving wasn't primitive at all. Someone in Pakistan 9,000 years ago figured out precision drilling using a fire-starting tool. Someone in Egypt figured out how to splint a loose tooth with wire. Someone somewhere figured out that aged urine kills bacteria, centuries before germs were even a concept anyone had. None of them had anesthesia. None of them understood infection the way we do now. And yet they kept trying, kept refining, kept passing techniques down generation after generation, because the alternative was unbearable pain with no end in sight. So the next time a dentist numbs your gum before touching a single tool to your tooth, remember that for most of human history, that simple relief didn't exist.
People sat still, fully conscious, and let someone else drill into their skull with sharpened stone, because living with the pain was somehow worse than facing it head-on. They survived without dentists the same way they survived everything else. Not because it didn't hurt, because they refused to just let it kill them.